So, hi. My mother just came back from her trip to the Middle East and she brought me a few things. She brought me this flag from the United Arab Emirates, which is, it's kind of small, but I now joined my USA flag or my upside down Texas flag. And she brought me this huge Egypt flag. I mean, look at this. This is fucking insane. She brought me a nice piece of rug. She, of course, brought me a nice Burj Khalifa little statue. Well, it's not really little. I mean, it's pretty long. It kind of resembles the size of my peach. She brought me a toy from Ferrari World because I am a man-child. And this. If you're German or European or do you live anywhere where they sell these, like if you want to give me a gift, it has to be some of these. And I asked her to bring a lot of them, like a lot of them, as many as she could carry. So yeah, if you want to send me some of these, hey, I would love you for that. And she had a flight on Paris, so she also brought me my little Eiffel Tower. I think this more reassembles the size of my peach, but that's not why we came here to make a video. We came here to talk about Argentina, particularly this video from the YouTuber H0ser, who I've talked multiple times about. We're here to talk about Argentina now. Argentina, what went wrong? That's the title of this video, all right? Now, for the ones who don't know, Argentina was actually one of the most prosperous countries in the world, like a century ago. And out of all the countries in Latin America, including my own, I think Argentina was probably the one that was closest to becoming a developed nation. But a few things happened. Many things went wrong. You could say, corruption or dictatorships. But Portugal or Spain, they had dictatorships too. So I think that's not the case, at least talking about Argentina and their economy. So let's see let's stop talking. All right, you probably already have enough of me. So let's see why Argentina failed or what went wrong.
Argentina today, it's an okay country. It's not exactly the best.
I mean, it's more than an okay country, all right? Like it has wine, some of the best food you're gonna taste on the planet. I mean, I really like Argentina. Not
best country on earth, but it's not the worst in its region. Yet economically, it is pretty lackluster.
Oh yeah.
But would it surprise you to know that Argentina was not once a relatively poor nation, but one of the richest countries on earth? That's right,
sir.
In the early 1900s, Argentina was the 7th richest country on earth per capita. Today, it is 71st.
So that's pretty high, 7th. So I think it was wealthier than the United States and many places in Europe. So you just gotta wonder, again, what happened?
In 1896, it had a GDP per capita greater than the United States, being the richest New World nation at the time. But today, it is not even the richest in Latin America, behind the nations of Uruguay, Chile, Panama, and Mexico.
Yeah,
it was very comparable to a country like Canada, rich, export-based, and growing. In fact, its growth followed very similarly to Canada's, until it didn't around the 1930s. Massive inflation nowadays, around 50% in recent years, has lowered Argentina's GDP per capita today.
Yeah, I mean, Argentina is one of those places, and I think one of my teachers in economics, because I did economics, but I took a few classes, and she told us a story about she went to dinner in Argentina, and she looked at the menu at the beginning of the dinner, and she looked at the prices. Well, it ended up being that at the end of the dinner, when she was finished, inflation was so high at one point that the prices of the food had already changed. The food was more expensive at the end of that 1 hour, 2 hour dinner. So that just gets to show you how much inflation Argentina has. I mean, it's not the worst. It's not a Zimbabwe. By the time they had inflation, it's not a Venezuela. But it is pretty bad. I mean, we're talking like you see 42% 2020, 2019, 53%.
To about 8,500 US dollars. So what went wrong if Argentina used to be a flourishing rich nation? What caused the Argentine paradox? Argentina has done one thing amazing. It broke the idea that the geography of a nation will equal how rich the people become. Argentina has one of the best...
Not only the geography, but even the demographics. Argentina is a very white country. There's a lot of European migration. So for the people that say that makes a country successful, well, there we go. Again, geography, I think Argentina has one of the
geographies on Earth to build a country on top of. Like another great power of the Americas, Argentina was protected by mountains to its west and a massive ocean to its east. The Paraguay, Pilcomayo, and Uruguay rivers also protected it to the north and gave it a navigable watershed to grow crops and ship those crops out of. All of these rivers converged to create the Rio de la Plata, the most important river of the region. Whoever controls the river controls the trade, and the Argentines were the one to inherit the river from the Spanish. The city which sat at the mouth, Buenos Aires, ended up being the most important in Argentina, and it showed. Today, Buenos Aires makes up just over a quarter of the entire population of Argentina, and it's where the Spanish elite came to when moving to Argentina. But inland was where the real money was made. The Pampas region was crazy for agriculture, particularly wheat and beef, and became associated with high-quality food worldwide. Early in its history, it also produced silver, whose Latin name is Argentina.
He mentioned the Rio de la Plata. Literally, the translation to English would be the Silver River. So Argentina had a lot of silver.
Hence the name Argentina. It also doesn't hurt that Argentina's climate is perfect for farming, being temperate, flat, and both hot and cool depending on the season. This makes Argentina have some of the best and biggest patches of farmland worldwide, which gave it and Buenos Aires some leverage over world markets. Its geography certainly blessed the nation, but it could have been the river system and the colonial power who controlled it, who created the first blunder in Argentine development. When you were a New World colony, you had 4 choices of rulers: English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish, and if you wanted to secure the future wealth of your nation, you had better hope it wasn't the Spanish. The Spanish generally created 2 types of inequality.
If you're more interested about some of these topics, you can watch a video I did on CROT. It's called the Mexican-American Border, and it basically compares the U.S. history and Mexico's history, and it kind of helps you understand why Mexico is poor and why the USA is rich. And one of the big reasons is that the foundations that the Spanish built throughout Latin America were not great. They were pretty shitty, designed to to have very little social mobility and a lot of corruption and elites controlling the government. So, yeah. Not great. Not
racial and economic.
Yeah, there we go.
They had an awful caste system of races which they used to classify native peoples and African slaves to determine where they will work.
And some of these is well, he's going to talk about Mexico. Let's
nowhere near as severe in Argentina as it was in an area.
Yeah, so there we go. 86% European extraction, whatever that means. But we have some Arabs, 3.3%. Jesus Christ. 3.4 Amerindian, 6.5% mestizos. We've got 0.4% of others. So I'm guessing, Africans and Asians. But most of it is European, higher than the USA, and I think higher than Canada or even Australia. So as you can see, a very European country. Well, there we go. Mexico is mostly mestizo at 60%. You got 31% others. And 7% Amerindian, which I think it's higher. But
area like Mexico or Peru with massive native empires already established.
Yes, sir.
But the other inequality, economic, the Spanish sure did bring. Instead of bringing poor farmers to build up an economy like the British did, the Spanish brought their elites to boost the colony's initial economy. It was essentially an investment into the colony.
And again, I think I have to say, that's not because the British had those intentions at first, because actually the British wanted to replicate the Spanish way of having colonies, So it wasn't because the British were necessarily better at that regard. It's simply that's what it came, They had to bring people to work the land because they had no other choice. While the Spanish, they could just take the Incas or the Aztec civilizations, and that's it,
Directly,
they don't have to
but
bring
it comes
people
with the side
in.
effect of a very, very powerful elite controlling most of the land in the country. And in Argentina, the elites, dwelling mostly in Buenos Aires, had control over most of the inland region's farms and mines. The wealth stayed inside of the estates and not given to the hands of the farmers. This gave Buenos Aires control over both the politics and commerce of the entire country and gave the Argentine elite that control. It doesn't help that its politics and commerce were very intertwined. Argentina was a very, very export-based colony, exporting mostly silver and wheat with beef added by the late 1700s, but they couldn't just give it to whoever. The Spanish limited who they could trade with, and generally, they were only allowed to trade with Spain. Well, That's not cool to the Argentine farmers who frankly didn't care
WTF.
if their wheat ended up in Spanish hands. You know who else said that wasn't cool? The United Kingdom.
The British,
The
yeah.
British had recently lost their major New World colony, the
Yeah,
States of
mate.
America, now united, and they wanted to get those juicy New World products somewhere else. They wanted to trade with Argentina, but Spain wouldn't let them. So, they invaded Argentina, which ended up failing twice. But after the war, the Argentines realized that the Spanish didn't really help.
Yeah, this had a horrific effect because now the Argentinians know that they can defeat a European power. So if they defeated the British, why would they have to be a Spanish colony if they can defeat probably the Spanish? Especially after Napoleon, they were so weak. So they defeated the British. I'm not exactly sure on the exact timelines because we're talking about late 1700s, early 1800s right now. So
them fight the British.
A lot of crazy stuff
themselves.
going on both in
so
the
they
Americas
had a war
and
of
Europe.
independence 3 years later and won. By 1860, the Republic of Argentina was created, but it was not stable. Right after independence, they fought a civil war between the elite centralists and the more rural federalists, where the centralists...
Yeah, it wasn't like a republic or a monarchy. It was called, the name of the country was the United Provinces of the Rio de la Plata. So it was more, I guess, similar to the USA. I don't know much about the Argentinian Civil War, but
ended up winning.
Definitely
and
not a
another
united
which made the
country.
British and French blockade the country, stopping the precious exports Argentina needed. In fact, there was basically just one long civil war until the 1860s, until Argentina federalized, with many rebellions lasting until the 1880s. And it's now when Argentina can finally start to grow. The Generation of 80 was a group of the political elite in Argentina from the 1880s until World War I. They oversaw much of the boom in Argentina's growth and are usually credited with it. They were much more economically liberal than the previous rulers, incentivizing freedom economically and wanted to see their country grow. This included trade liberalization, making it much easier for Argentina to trade with whoever they wanted to trade with.
And following this very liberal policies, and at least at the time, because now the word liberal means a lot of things for a lot of people, but sort of, I guess you could call it capitalist, neoliberal, you could call it, policies that a lot of countries became wealthy at this point. Argentina and the USA being two of the largest examples.
If Argentina already wasn't export-based, it was now heavily export-driven and has been described in this time as a super exporter. Between 1880 and 1905, the Argentine economy grew by 7.5 times, or 850%, making them now the 7th wealthiest nation. During this time, many European immigrants had to make a choice whether they should go to the USA or Argentina, as both were booming, growing nations. Many Italians chose Argentina, being of a similar Latin culture, and along with others, the Argentine population quintupled. In fact, even today, about 2/3 of Argentines have Italian ancestry, more than those with Spanish ancestry.
Yep.
During this time...
It's crazy to think that a former Spanish colony has more Italian blood or ancestry than a Spanish one. So, yeah, not much to say. It's just interesting. A lot of, when we think about Italian and German immigration, we generally think about the USA, but of course, Argentina, Uruguay, and southern Brazil were huge hubs for European migration at those times.
Infrastructure, the railway, and literacy rates all spiked, and it looked like Argentina was going to become the powerhouse of Latin America.
Boom, baby. What happened?
It was even 4 times richer than neighboring Brazil at this time. Today, that number is only 1.25 times.
Almost nothing.
It wasn't all fine, though. There were some pretty big problems that would bite them later. The first is that Argentina was very slow to industrialize, as most of the money being made was through agricultural exports, and much of those profits went straight to the Buenos Aires elites. Frankly, the elites did not want to industrialize. Second is their investment and foreign investment, which Argentina and Buenos Aires might have got a little too much of. They focused on foreign investment to prop up their exporting industries while neglecting domestic consumption. They needed the Europeans to keep importing their food or else their whole economy would collapse, and that had to happen at some point.
Ay, caramba.
The opening of the Panama Canal, making less ships travel around South America visiting Argentina, and the start of World War I in 1914 really slowed down Argentine exports, but it didn't kill the nation. No, that didn't happen until the Great Depression. Argentina was likely one of the hardest hit nations on earth from the Great Depression, starting in 1929.
I mean, they haven't really recovered, have they?
We can even see on our graph of Canada versus Argentina that when the Great Depression hit Argentina, it started a downfall that it never recovered from. Their wonderful foreign investment and exports to other nations suddenly stopped when every other nation was focused on keeping themselves alive. Argentina did not have the consumption to keep the economy moving and not even industry to be self-reliant.
But okay, I'm interesting to see what follows, because a lot of nations that were heavily dependent on uh, exports, like for example, I'm thinking of Australia, right? I think they did exported a lot of products too. Yet Australia right now is pretty wealthy and developed, and Argentina isn't. So what happened? Something else must have happened.
So they were stuck in a hard place. The new strategy was to focus on import substitution industrialization, essentially replacing foreign goods with domestic goods, blocking off most imports to focus on industrializing yourself into a stronger domestic economy. This strategy never really worked. The GDP shrunk by 25% in 3 years, and political turmoil and violence were more and more common.
And this brought
People migrated from the country to the cities for more job opportunities, only for the elite to become more powerful and not focus on the development of the country. People were more desperate for any type of change to the country, especially during World War II when exports slowed even more. The Argentines were becoming poor, and there was a man who promised to fix that.
Argentina and World War II.
Juan Peron can be seen as the mascot for why Argentina has fallen so far from richness. Argentina was certainly not the only nation suffering during the Great Depression to World War II, and like most other countries, could have made a recovery after if it wasn't for Juan Peron. Juan Peron was elected in 1946 after a military coup on the promises of more land for the people, higher wages, and Argentine security from foreign powers, both military.
So here it says the blue, it's Partido Laborista. That's like a labor party. I think that would be like literal translation. The red one says Democratic Union, and the gray is just national territory. So similar, I guess, to like in the USA, for example, the Alaska territory or the New Mexico territory. This was, I'm guessing,
militarily and economically. He was an authoritarian type of guy whose political ideology, Peronism, wasn't exactly the most orthodox. Peronism is complicated, but it's kind of like a mix between fascism and socialism. Some things Peronism believes in as no foreign investment or outside assistance, self-reliance, heavy nationalism, cutting exports severely, import substitution, political independence, social justice, in particular feminism, heavy corporatism, and many, many social programs.
I guess you could say the worst aspects of both socialism and fascism, and then you get Peronism.
He claimed to be a third position to the opposing forces of communism and capitalism at the time.
Yeah,
frankly,
sure, buddy.
There were some successes, like Argentina having the largest middle class, most unionized population, and highest paid workers in Latin America. But for every success, there were probably 5 failures. For instance, he was essentially a dictator and slowly nationalized many industries to his rule, limiting their growth. His policies surrounding exports and the self-reliance of Argentina basically killed the nation's largest and only way to make money. And as for these social programs he promised, well, when you get rid of your way to make money, you can't really pay for them. So they just made new money, and then that money became worthless. From 19...
Yep. This is a problem, and this has been seen. I think Greece, you could really find a lot of similarities. I think not obviously at the extent, but
1944 to 1974, inflation averaged 26%, far above the 2% most developed countries aim for. And parents' forced redistribution of wealth away from agriculture and into industrialization, trying to protect industry, did not make inflation any better. So by 1950, the average Argentine was about half as rich as the average American. Juan Perón did lose office to a coup d'etat in 1955, who continued the import substitution industrialization gambit that has clearly worked so well. But he came back. In 1973, he was elected once more, and then died the next year. His wife, Isabel Perón, ruled for a short time after him, but she was later exiled to Spain in 1981.
Alright,
the parents may have left, but their legacy still remains in the country to this day.
I mean, being exiled to
When
Spain,
the parents left, manufacturing in Argentina was on the decline, perhaps due to the lift of import substitution policies. GDP per capita fell by 20% from 1975 to 1990, and inflation averaged 300% in the same period. The
Jesus
deficits were
Christ.
so high that many foreign investors decided to leave the country outright, and when Argentina could not pay off its massive foreign debt made by the dictatorships, it fell into a huge recession from 1998 to 2002, called the Argentine Great Depression. Skipping over some details, Argentina began to grow again, but inflation was still high and the debts accumulated could not be paid back again. So in 2014, Argentina defaulted on its debt again, and again in 2020. To put it lightly, Argentina is not exactly the most trusted country on the world stage when it comes to keeping your money safe with them.
Yeah,
And
I think the Argentinian bonds are pretty cheap, and they supposedly give you some very interesting returns. I think it's like what 7%. I mean, don't trust my word. Go Google the bond rates on Argentina. But
now, Argentina is a
kinda
relatively
interesting.
poor country which had huge potential to become a massive new world power, but it fumbled the bag, and the Argentines must live with that past. The Argentine paradox has a couple of key answers. Argentina should have been an export-based rich nation much like Canada, but its failure to find new alternatives after its initial wave of geographical expansion like the US, Canada, and Australia did hurt its ability to bounce back while exports were low. Unlike the English colonies, only a small number of landowners owned huge areas of land, creating a very powerful elite with huge control.
you can make here the similarities between Mexico and Spain. Sorry, not Mexico and Spain. Argentina and Mexico, because they have the exact same foundations when it comes to the Spanish Empire.
Over the country, concentrating the wealth among themselves. The slow transition to industrialize, along with import substitution industrialization, raised prices and stopped domestic consumption, and the depreciation of their currency due to the huge inflation caused their productivity to fall rapidly. Argentina is the opposite of a success story on the world stage. It was once a rich nation full of opportunity, but is now a mediocre regional power with nothing really going for it.
Oh, damn. I mean, Jesus Christ, bro. I mean, we get it, all right? We get it. You don't have to be so fucking rude. I mean, well, I'm sorry about my mattress. I know it looks fucking gross, but hey, I gotta clean my sheets, all right? I'm sorry. Your boy is, that's not the fanciest part of the job. I get it. Well, I mean, shit, I feel sad. Argentina is a great country. I've got family in Argentina. I guess even you could say I'm partially Argentine. And it's a fellow Latin American nation at the end of the day. And the ones who got closer to that, like, developed nation status, yet they have failed tremendously. And today they struggle a lot. It's beautiful, the vineyards, the architecture. It's a very European-like country, and it's beautiful. Not because of that, but it's just beautiful in general. And it's just so sad to see them struggle. I hope that they can make a recovery. It doesn't seem very likely as things are today. However, hey, China 50 years ago was pretty shitty. Now it's getting better. So never say never, I guess. Justin Bieber, whatever.